holiness.
There's a recent Gallup poll was designed to show where Americans find most personal satisfaction, fulfillment, or contentment. Before I get into that, I want to explain something to you. You're going to hear this word satisfaction a lot, fulfillment a lot, contentment a lot in this message. And I think that there is a misconception when it comes to contentment. I think that when we think about being content about something, we think that we've had to settle for something that is less than satisfactory. But actually, it's quite the opposite, especially with the Greek words that are used in our New Testament and even in the Septuagint, in the Old Testament, which are translated contentment. It has to do with one who has found satisfaction. In fact, when Paul says, I have learned to be content in all situations, it's actually a word that literally means self-sufficient. And it's a mindset, it's an attitude of the heart that says, no, this is satisfactory. I have found myself to be satisfied in these situations. And so as we move forward and as we use these words, contentment, I want to make sure we're on the same page whenever I say that word and then what you're thinking about. And so as I looked at this survey, this Gallup poll that had to do with them trying to find out where Americans find most satisfaction, fulfillment, and contentment. I'm not going to go through all of these things, but I thought it was interesting to note where people find the least amount of contentment in their lives. And midway through that, I guess it was kind of, I guess you would say around 40% of all the people who were surveyed, and this survey has a plus or minus, 3% of error, the same stuff that they always say. But I guess it was probably around the 40, 50% tile where majority of the people, said that they were either unsatisfied or satisfied. Romance, was that fell like right there in the middle. But you have career, personal growth, fun and recreation, and money all fell at the very bottom, of the satisfactory percentile. In fact, only 26% could say that they were highly satisfied with their careers. 26% say they were highly satisfied with their own personal growth. 23% said they were satisfied or highly satisfied with fun and recreation. And 14% said they were highly satisfied when it came to money. What's interesting to note about this, and we won't go into detail, but at the higher end, where a majority of the people were satisfied, had to do with their families and religion or church. But that begs the question of why is there such a large gap between the things where you're most highly satisfied with, which are so contingent, inseparable with the things that people are least satisfied with. I want to go through some of these with you. When it came to romance, and this is just as a parenthetical, guys, I'm just trying to help us out here, When it came to romance, men are more satisfied than women. Numbers don't lie. Men are more satisfied than women. And so men, what women consider romantic may not necessarily mean be what you think is romantic. And so I thought I would just throw that out there for your listening pleasure this morning. 38% of women said that they were actually satisfied. The rest were not. But when it came to the career, working men and women are about equal when it comes to being satisfied or unsatisfied with their career. Satisfaction does, however, increase somewhat with age. And so 19% of the people who were surveyed among the ages of 18 to 29 years old would say that they were satisfied, whereas 32% among those who were 50 and up said that they were actually satisfied with their career. And I think that may have something to do with the fact that they're one step closer to retirement. But that wasn't pointed out in the survey. When it came to personal growth, women were more likely to say that they were highly satisfied than men. Only 21% of the men said they were highly satisfied with their personal growth. And among young adults were the most satisfied with their growth. And what's interesting is that the oldest adults were the least satisfied. Only 19% of those who were surveyed 50 and up Only 19% said that they were satisfied with their personal growth. And when it came to money, overall, women are less satisfied than men. That may have something to do with the romance too. But overall, women are less satisfied than men. And this is interesting to note that among the households earning $75,000 or more per year, just 24% say they are highly satisfied. I bring that up because we are all look for things to help bring us satisfaction and security and fulfillment. But what's interesting to note is that the things that bring us the least amount of contentment are the things that bring the immediate satisfaction. Yet it is the immediate satisfaction that we always or oftentimes seem to run to. Yet it leaves us less fulfilled. And we spend tons of money and resources and energy looking for those things that are bring us to this place where we feel happy and fulfilled and content with life. Yet these things oftentimes leave us continually searching and unsettled and lead us to being greedy and covetous, always wanting more, but yet never satisfied. And then we have David, who stands up in the midst of the world's or the lack of satisfaction in the world, and he says, you want to know who my shepherd is? My leader, my God, my owner, it's the Lord. And as a result, I have all that I need. You've got to see this from David's perspective, not as a shepherd. Yes, David understood what it meant to be a shepherd, but David is looking at his surroundings, at the events of his life, in the midst of chaos and uncertainty and lack of fulfillment, and where all this stuff brings us. He says, in the middle of this, I can be satisfied. I can be content. You want to know why? Let me tell you why. Because the Lord, He is my shepherd. And as a result, I have all that I need. Our traditional translations say it this way. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. The word want there in the Hebrew literally means to lack nothing, to not be deficient when it comes to proper care, to proper management, or to guidance. And David is able to say this because he is content with the Lord, and consequently, he is not craving or desiring anything else. It's a mindset. It's an attitude of the heart. And it's something that David has acquired and grown into. But don't mistake what David is saying here. David understood what it meant to suffer. He understood what it meant to have hardships. He understood what it meant to have needs and to be in poverty. He was hounded by the forces of Saul, not to mention his own son Absalom. If you read the Psalms of David, you will see into the heart of one who suffers in this way. He struggles in this way, in this world, yet in the midst of these hardships, he was able to boast, I have all that I need with the expert care and management of my Lord, my owner, my leader. And he could say this because he found contentment, satisfaction in God, his shepherd, his owner. As I said last week, David would have understood the welfare of any flock is entirely dependent upon the management of the owner. And so I want to read to you an account from a shepherd who had flocks in eastern Africa as he speaks into this idea, the Lord is my shepherd, I have all that I need. He says this: the tenant sheepman on the farm next to my first ranch was the most indifferent manager I have ever met. He was not concerned about the conditions of his sheep. His land was neglected. He gave little or no time to his flock, letting them pretty well forage for themselves as best they could, both summer and winter. And if you don't know this, sheep have to be taken care of. If left alone, they will more than likely perish. He gave little or no time to his flock, letting them pretty well forage for themselves as best they could. Both summer and winter, they fell prey to dogs, to cougars, to rustlers. Every year, these poor creatures were forced to gnaw at bare, brown fields and impoverished pastures. Every winter, there was a shortage of nourishing hay and wholesome grain to feed the hungry sheep. Shelter to safeguard and protect the suffering sheep from storms and blizzards was scanty and inadequate. They had only polluted muddy water to drink. There had been a lack of salt and other trace minerals needed to offset their sickly pastures. And in their thin, weak, and diseased condition, these poor sheep were a pathetic sight. To all their distress, the heartless, selfish owner seemed utterly callous and indifferent. He simply did not care. What if his sheep did want green grass, fresh water, shade, safety, or shelter from the storms? What if they did want relief from wounds, bruises, diseases, and parasites? He ignored their needs. He couldn't care less. Why should he? They were just sheep fit only for the slaughterhouse. Understand, this is not what David had in mind whenever he said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I have all I need." Because this is not what it looks like to be under the care and protection of the Lord. It's actually what it looks like to be owned by sin, fleshly desires, and to be under the management of the most cunning liar, the ruler of this world, Satan. See, David is in the midst of trials. You got to understand, majority of David's psalms that he wrote were psalms that he wrote in trials and affliction and in the midst of suffering. And in the middle of this, he looks to God and he says, regardless of my circumstances, regardless of what physically I may feel at times that I need, or where areas in life where I feel like I may be lacking, or areas where I feel like there should be some improvement, he says, in the midst of all of this, I can still stand and say, the Lord is my shepherd. I still, in the midst of all of this, have all that I need. Because David understood that when he gave his life into the hands of the Lord, that all would be taken care of, even if he didn't quite understand the circumstances of the day. See, when David looked at God and he looked at the Lord, and as we look at Jesus, the good shepherd, and we say, the Lord is our shepherd, we have entrusted into his hands our life. When we say that and we say we have all that we need, it says that we ourselves have found contentment and satisfaction regardless of what the world brings to us, regardless of our circumstances. In the heat of the moment, we're still able to look to the Lord and say, you know what? I'm going to lack nothing. Regardless of what's going on here, everything's going to be okay. Even though things may not turn out the way that I want them to, I'm going to be fine. Because I actually truly trust my life in his hands. And David does this. But here's the thing. Jesus says you can't serve two masters. And either we stand up boldly and proudly and boastfully say, the Lord is my shepherd. I have entrusted my life in the hands of Jesus. Or we stand here ever searching and wanting and desiring and looking and expending energy and time and resources and money into trying to find those things that will bring us some sense of security and fulfillment and contentment, satisfaction. David says that this is what it looks like to be in the hands of sin, of the liar of this world, the ruler Satan, to be tempted and to be given into those temptations, thinking that these things are going to bring us fulfillment. It leaves us no different from the sheep whose owner is indifferent, because at the end of the day, he's got them. And that's all that matters. That's not what David had in mind when he said, the Lord is my shepherd. I will lack nothing. And so even us as disciples in the midst of all this chaos, we should be able to stand up and say, the Lord is my shepherd. I have all I need. I will always have all I need because my leader is the good shepherd who said, quote, I give my life for the sheep. And again, he says, I come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. And he says one more time, my sheep hear my voice, and they follow me. I think we hear the voice. I think sometimes where we fail is the following. We're good at listening. And you might argue with me, well, if you're listening, you actually will hear and you actually will follow. Well, we're good at hearing. We're good at sitting and studying, and we're good at quoting, and we're good at parsing, and we're good at reverberating it in the Greek and the Hebrew and the Aramaic and discussing what language. I think sometimes where we struggle is actually the following part. I think that's where we fall short. The sheep hear his voice, he says, and they follow me. And so you may ask me, okay, this sounds great. Okay, what doesn't sound great about this thing that I can stand up and say, the Lord, he is my shepherd, and as a result, I will lack nothing. I will have all that I need. What doesn't sound so great about that? Who doesn't want that? And it sounds great, and it's, but preacher, it sounds like it may be a bit bloviating here. I mean, like really? Can I really truly find satisfaction in Jesus? Can I find myself being content in whatever situation? Is that really a reality? Is that even a possibility? Because we have needs and we have desires, and there are times where we lack things. Yes, but here's the thing. In the midst of those times, when we see the physical needs or the things that we're lacking, even in the midst of that, we can say, you know what? I'm going to have all sufficiency. Because my trust is in his care, in his hands. And if you're not experiencing this satisfaction, excuse me, that comes with putting your life in the hands of Jesus, then you have to ask yourself this question. I need some water, please. Am I really following Jesus? Am I? Thank you. You drank out of this? Am I? Oh, we're cool. We're good. I got kids. It's blessed water right here. So maybe the question is, if we don't, thank you so much. That feels so good. If we don't find this satisfaction, if we're not finding ourselves in this place where we are content with whatever happens, what may, if we can't stand up and say, you know what, the Lord's my shepherd, I ain't worried about it, then we have to ask ourselves, are we really following him? Because see, that's where you are going to experience the contentment. That's where you're going to experience the satisfaction. That's where you're going to experience the fulfillment. So if we want to get to the place where we experience this happiness and this joy, I'm just going to hold on to this. That's okay. You don't want it back, right? Okay, good. If we want to experience this, it comes through us following him, his care, his guidance, and it's in that we ultimately find true contentment. But we've got to follow him. We have to follow him. We have to put him first. We have to see him as our leader. We must listen to his voice. We must deny ourselves, and our lives must revolve around him. And when that happens, I'm telling you, even just when you begin the journey, I'm telling you, you will experience what it means to say, you know what? I got everything I want. Because everything I want, I find in him. He satisfies. He does fulfill me. Maybe, how long ago? How long have we been married? 14 years? 15? Something like that? 13? I just got to remember the word. I don't have to remember anything else. I'm going to hear about that later. Probably 15, 16 years ago, I finally came back to Jesus. I went off, and some of you know bits of my story. But when I came back, and I don't know about you, if you left and you came back and you began your journey anew, I don't know if you ever started over or not, and your journey may be different. For me, it was chaos. Coming back and trying to follow Jesus and figure out what this was all about and what I should do. It was chaos for me. It was lots of confusion, but I kept going because I knew I had experienced, I knew what it was like to be in the sheep that was owned by the sin and by the fleshly desires, that was owned by the manager who could care less. I experienced that. I was the sheep looking out at the field that was green, and I could not grab a hold to it. I saw people who were happy. I saw people who seemed to be fulfilled and content, and they weren't even rich. They weren't even affluent. Like, they had nothing. I had more things than them. I had more friends. I threw better parties. My life seemed like it was great. Yet I was left gnawing at the brown grass, drinking out of muddy water. And I was not content. And I kept searching, and finally, I actually listened to the voices, and I actually listened to the people whom God was putting in my life. And I jumped the fence. But it was chaos. It was confusion for me. I didn't know what it looked like to truly love Jesus and to truly follow him. I didn't know what any of this was about. So I left a worship assembly time of worship one Wednesday night. And I'm in my truck, and I can still remember it to this day. I'm coming out, and I'm living in Fort Walton Beach, and I come out, and I'm about to get on the main drag. Can I say that today? No? And I'm at this red light, and my emotions got the better of me, and then I just broke down because I felt so confused about which way to turn. Not literally, but spiritually. I knew where I lived. I was sober at this point, okay? And I just cried out to God, and I said, God, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I'm clueless about where to turn. And I pleaded for help. And I essentially said, okay, here it is. Here's me. I didn't get an answer that night. It was about a week or two later, through various circumstances and events, and I won't go into the details right now, I ended up being on the phone with someone who was a childhood friend of mine who had been called to the ministry. And I had spoken to him 10, 12 years. And even how we got in contact with one another is something that is not coincidence. And as a result of that phone call, on my birthday, which was that weekend, I drove up to Pensacola, and I sat with him for hours, and we discussed, and we studied. And as a result of me pleading with God, saying, here it is. Literally, I am putting my life in your hands because I don't know where to go. He gave me the direction. He pointed me and put people in my life, and he opened up doors. And as a result, I'm standing here today. Because I never left his direction. No, I've wanted to. I've looked at and thought the fields on the other side were greener. Or just for the sense of excitement of being able to sneak out of the pen. I've been there, and I understand, but I always come back to this one thing. I used to be there, and I remember what that was like. And I remember the lack of satisfaction, lack of fulfillment. I was not content, and I knew it could not be found there, and I know today it cannot be found there. But it can be found in Jesus. As I look back and I think about how he pointed me in that, just that specific event, I find satisfaction. I was at a conference last weekend. Was it last weekend? I can't remember anything. And I struggled with some things personally. Just needing some help, some guidance, being burnt out. You know, you just get in those places where you just need something. And there was a point where I was there, and there was a song that we were singing, and I could not sing those words. But in that moment, see, the words of the song said something like I'm not going to sing it to you. It's something like this. I have all that I need. You've always been there. You've always provided. And then that second, I could not sing those words, but then I took note of that. I can't sing these words. I can't say this. And then it hit me. I began to reflect back on my whole life, and I said, God, you've always been there for me. You really always have. Like, you really do have all that I need. Forgive me for not trusting. But once again, I lay my life in your hands. You're my owner. You're my manager. You're my guide. Where you lead, I will follow. And I'm telling you, don't mistake what David was saying here. David wasn't saying that life was going to be fair. David didn't put on a tutu and skip through a field of daisies after this. That would have been weird. David understood that hardships, that the world, that because of the condition of the world and the brokenness, that those things would still be there. He got that. But he said, in the midst of that, I could still say, the Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. And the Apostle Paul, whenever he spoke these words, in every situation, I've learned to be content. He was not in the best of situations. But he says, even though I'm still able to be satisfied. Why? Because he found true satisfaction and contentment in his relationship with the Lord. And as a result, he wanted nothing else. And so we have to first put our trust in him, see him as our leader, must listen to his voice, deny ourselves, lives need to revolve around him. And if we're not feeling that satisfaction and contentment, we have to ask ourselves, are we actually following him? Or are we just sitting down, absorbing information? Or are we living by it? When we do this, we will see ourselves transform and change. Personal growth will take place. Husbands and wives will begin to love each other as Christ does and begin to find satisfaction in their marriages. Fathers and mothers begin to care for their children as Christ does, and not only do they find satisfaction being parents, but their children get a glimpse of what it looks like to live under the care and the love and the guidance of Jesus. In the workplaces, our careers, we begin to look at these occupations differently, where we work willingly at whatever we do as though we were working for the Lord rather than for people. Colossians 3:23 actually rings a bell whenever we put full confidence, we find contentment in Jesus, where satisfaction is not based on the amount of money, but based on a growing relationship with Jesus. See, when we put our trust in Jesus and experience what it's like to be content in him, we can be content in whatever situation in which we find ourselves. Because when we seek satisfaction through him, nothing else will satisfy. Nothing. So here's the question for you. Can you stand up today proudly and boastfully say, the Lord, he is my shepherd? Can, in doing so, you stand up and say, my life is in you? Can you say, my strength is in you? Can you say, my hope is in you? Can you say, the Lord is my shepherd and I have all that I need? And if you can, let's stand and let's praise him for this.